Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 23 of our Seeking Harmony conversation today. For today, we are going to explore some of the topics that we've seen in the news over the last few days to a week. And yeah, so we'd like to invite all of you to please feel free to share your thoughts, your insights, any experiences that may be related to our topics. And also, please feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous conversations. So for today, I'm going to ask the team to please highlight to us what they thought really stood out in terms of topics for today. And, and then we will take it from there in terms of our conversation.
Yeah, I think what stood out for me the most was the Chilean constitution that was being suggested. I thought that was interesting, and it was cool, like what they were proposing, and I thought it was just interesting too, like how popular it was with people, whether or not it will pass, and everything like that. So yeah. Thought that was of note. Did you guys have a different topic, or do you want to go with that one? What stood out to you?
I think it stood out to me too. And I think it's quite cool that, first of all, there's a constitution proposal with so many improvements to the last one in terms of equality of gender, climate change, indigenous rights, and the fact that it's so popular among people in Chile, and the fact that we heard about it like throughout the world. I think it's so cool. And it shows that people really do care about this stuff, and that they were, kind of almost awaiting for this stuff to happen. So yeah, that's my take on it. How do you guys feel about that?
So I think the thing that really stood out for me was just the idea that they are literally rewriting their entire constitution. But not only that they've done that, they've done it in a process where people were invited into the and I think it was called a Congress or something like that, but basically into the commission that's rewriting the constitution. So it was very much a shift from major political players in Chile to much more representative of movements within the country and potentially even individuals. So that was quite interesting to see that they've got such a huge contingent of people giving input into a constitution, and it's not political party-led.
Yeah, it was interesting that I felt it was, they're unsure, like right now with the polls, they're unsure about how popular it's going to be and whether it's going to pass. But I feel like some perspectives I read said it just depends on like communication and how well people who advocate the Constitution communicate what it's going to do. Because there's some, media who are kind of, well, I think partly just arguing against it, but also partly just spreading misconceptions or spreading more like outlying suggestions for the Constitution that didn't actually make it in the Constitution at all. But that will get people to like be shocked and say, oh, I don't want this. So there's a bit of a, information conflict going on there. But yeah, I did think that was notable that you know, people are like trying to explore the truth, and they're trying to find like what is the best way forward for their country and what is just. And yeah, that, like you said, like I don't think that Congress that you mentioned, I don't think it had any representatives from any of Chile's political parties. You know, it was just, I don't know how people were selected, but, and they had like an allocation of like, they want 17 indigenous people there, you know, from the native peoples of Chile, things like that. It just shows that they're really, they are caring about inclusion and people are asking for it. So, which is cool in Chile.
You know, it makes me think of like two things. I forgot the first. The second is that this week, when we talked about last week, rather, when we talked about leadership changes, the fact that people were, you know, feeling tense about all these leadership changes, their government maybe not respecting their wishes and why they were elected, which was to serve them. The fact that they really wanted to include people that were not, you know, from political parties necessarily, and that truly had a voice and truly like had issues, problematics to present to Congress, shows that it's kind of like in the same vein, I think, and shows that we can have a government is like totally capable of doing this type of things and responding positively to what its people, its citizens want, you know. And I think it's huge, and a huge example of like, that's how you have a relationship with your people, basically. And yeah, the first thing that I wanted to say, I remember that often in this discussion, when we talk about relatively positive news, we say like, it's a step in the right direction. Like, obviously there's still work to do, but it's a step in the right direction. And I feel like this is just an example of, you know, step by step, you will have a result. Like, you can take the step and be confident that there is going to be a result. And it shows a lot for Chile today. And I think that's great, a great example of just moving forward and keep on respecting truth and respecting your people and your citizens.
So what I feel like you're talking to is a very strong sense of progression. And as you said, that progress doesn't necessarily happen immediately or overnight. It literally is one step at a time. But I think the thing that really stood out for me was the level of inclusivity that's actually being included in Chile's constitution. So women's rights, indigenous people's rights, the right of people to access water, which was previously sold off as rights to rich individuals, which is something that we probably touched on a little bit in what we saw with the unrest in Sri Lanka over last week's topic. And so I feel like there's a much more progressive nature to the Constitution of Chile, and the fact that it becomes constitutional as a right is quite progressive for a nation. And I think the thing that stood out for us, or probably the very headline said it would be one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. And just from the article, it sounds like it. And I know that Sage, you mentioned that there's obviously a sentiment in Chile that some people are not as supportive because of efforts to undermine the rewrite and efforts to misinform the general public of some of the conversations that have taken place and items proposed for rewrite. But I feel like that's also, like that it's a kind of a disingenuous move in the country to make sure that power is concentrated in political parties as opposed to people's movements, as opposed to free-thinking individual people. I think there was very much a sense in the article that there's a lot of left-leaning people that have been part of this process to rewrite the Constitution. So yeah, I think that again we're seeing at play a deflection of progress in terms of the misinformation that's happening. But we also realize, and we've seen it play out countless times, that the truth cannot be hidden, cannot remain hidden for long. Mm-hmm. So, at some point, the truth does start to surface. And so, yeah, I think one of the things that's probably top of mind for me is I hope and pray that the Chilean people realize that there is propaganda at play and that they vote in their best interests.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say vote in their best interest is because obviously one of the things that we read was that once the Constitution has been written, it has to be adopted through a referendum process.
Yeah, they're voting on it in September, on September 4th. And yeah, it's, I feel like it's just really important to meet people where they're at, because, I saw these pictures of it and of people selling, like street vendors were like, oh, I'm not selling juice anymore or newspapers. For now, I'm just going to sell books of the Constitution to people because everyone wanted to buy it. And I was like, that is such a sight, but it's a big document. It's like close to 200 pages. And it's a lot, it's not complex. It's not particularly complex writing. It's just a lot. It's like 200 pages. And I read through like some of it and I was like, okay, damn, this is like for another day. So I could just imagine people flipping through it and being like, oh, okay. So, I think it's good. It all has to be codified in law, like what they're doing, right? So that's why it's so long. But they have to meet people where they're at. And those who are pro the Constitution would have to get out their sound bites and their info about it, so people know what they're voting for. But yeah, but my feeling of it is that though it would be very helpful to the Chilean people, because it just seems like it's just giving back a lot of the sovereignty and the rights of land use, mainly land use and water use, and the use of resources back to people, indigenous people, being able to use the resources that are in their territories. And people, like we said, having a right to water, to me, is really, really fundamental, because it's kind of like, it's like you can't just like, if you auction off water resources, but that's literally what they did. Like they auction off liters per second of water. Like they're like, this section of river has 67 liters per second of water running through it. And we're going to auction it off. in these quantities, and private companies could buy it. So you literally have, I'm not kidding you, like there's a Canadian teacher's pension, like the Canadian school teacher's pension company owns water rights in Chile. There's an Italian company that owns water rights in Chile. Any private company. And I'm just like, why? Like, why? Like privatize, like what is the core, the heart and soul of why you want something privatized? And does that benefit the situation of owning water? Is what like Chileans are asking. And what they've seen is, private companies will use their water for huge avocado farms, to grow avocados. Those take a lot of water. Chile's not a particularly wet country. The Atacama Desert is in Chile up north, although not all of Chile's like that. And so I'm like, and then these people are left without water sometimes. Like they have to cut down on showers, cut down on water that they use for cooking, for growing their own plants and stuff like that. Like what do you guys feel about this whole privatization of water versus like a public good? I don't know.
Well, you brought up a lot of good points. First with constitution, sometimes it's like in certain countries the constitution is really long, but I agree that there could be like ways to make it accessible to many, because like it's just a big text. And the privatization of water is something that happens all around the world, sadly, but unfortunately. And so in places where there's a shortage of water and deserts, like in Chile, it's obviously going to cause problems. But there is also a big historical factor behind that, is that in the 60s, they had already tried to go against private companies and, people that owned big acres of, like large acres of land in the countries, to be like, to have something, a government, a society that is more turned towards people. And then it was overthrown and they had a dictator. Mm-hmm. So their efforts to not have everything so privatized were smashed, and it got worse. So like it feels like there's a cycle, like somehow they're coming back around, and this time trying to manifest their choice into reality for good, because it was like, well, as a country, what are they truly choosing? Like, and they saw that for decades, the privatization of water doesn't really work. So obviously they're going to come back to this problem again, maybe like 60 years later, and try to solve it. That's what I feel. It's kind of spiritual, but that's what I feel. And privatization of water is like a big problem in many parts of the world. And I think that's why they set an example also in making water a right for everyone, because that's not the case today. So yeah, that was my feeling about that.
I would be curious to explore this privatization of water thing, probably as a separate topic for one of our weeks. Like, I have not actually heard of countries where water rights have been privatized. So when you say it's quite pervasive, Irina, I'd like to kind of get a sense of what that is. Is it like 60% of the world, 70% of the world? What are we talking about in real facts? And again, what impact does that have on a population? And it's something that Sage also spoke to in terms of, people not even just having water for basic sanitary purposes, you know, like washing and cooking and cleaning and all those other kind of things. So it would be interesting to understand, to kind of just see how prevalent that practice is, because yeah, might be something that I missed, but I can't say that I've ever really heard of water rights being privatized or being privatized. I get it that they probably, as nations, there's probably rates and taxes attached to it because of the fact that water needs to be purified to a certain extent. But I've never quite come across the concept of privatization of water inland. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's actually like kind of common, but because we're not like countries with 80% desert where the water is like extremely expensive, we don't feel it for ourselves. But yeah, it happens in like Egypt and Jordani and even in Switzerland, but they're not suffering from it. Like companies privatize resources of water that should not be privatized, basically. So it's kind of a huge problem in terms of
that's what I'm saying. It should. I think it's definitely worth an exploration.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it does have an impact on basic human needs and basic human rights. You know, so for me, that's quite an interesting thing to explore at some point. But I think just one of the things that we probably need to mention, and that we've probably not done so yet, is that the whole process to initiate the rewriting of the Constitution of Chile had significant riots and protests and really violent action as a precursor to the decision to enter into the agreement for peace, or the peace agreement, or whatever they call it. And so again, we are seeing a lot of shift in Chile, but the precursor was literally quite a significant violent process. And those protests actually turned violent. And so again, we come back to the question of, does the violence serve a purpose, and did it serve a purpose? And is it sometimes necessary? And I know it's a very hypothetical question. We're probably never going to really get to a complete answer, but having seen throughout history that violence is generally a precursor to change, it feels like there's a recipe and a pattern that probably needs to be healed in terms of how we identify the need to change and how we then go about implementing that change.
Yeah, it feels in me, it feels like it's like people claiming their power and not allowing, just being less tolerant of stuff, of stuff going in ways that are harmful to them, or or don't serve them, because maybe, I don't know, because it seems like, things, perhaps it's that like issues get to the point where people become extremely like they reach a breaking point, at which point they feel like that's what they have to do, and so versus so perhaps it's about being more like proactive and exercising your power, sooner or something like that. But it also makes me think of like, there are situations where like you do have to use violence or whatever, like you have to repel, you have to like put up a boundary to, you could say spiritually, but like defend yourself, stand up for yourself, whatever, against, an attacker. And I suppose that could take different forms. But if you look at like, the war in Ukraine, it's like, of course, like they're going to have to like defend themselves right there and fight back. So yeah, it is interesting. It is really interesting. But yeah, no, there's been so many, changes that were brought on initially through violence. So yeah, I don't know, it's a good topic for us. Yeah.
I think it's a very good topic. I think it's worth exploration, and I think it's something that's come up in various forms across various topics, and it's literally the fact that you have to meet people where they live, and sometimes you can't speak softly when there's noise around you because nobody's going to listen to you or hear you. So you kind of need to up the decibels and meet people where they live. And the simplicity of it is, no matter how we choose to love or not love, an arsehole is an arsehole, and you got to meet an arsehole where they live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't just be like, you can't just send like some nice letters to Vladimir Putin and be like, hey, we live here. We're happy with how things are now. If you could please desist, thank you. Love Ukraine.
I mean, can you see that email from Zelensky? Hey, Vlad, would you like to come over for a cup of coffee so that we can have a conversation about our borders and the Black Sea occupation?
Yeah. It's not going to happen. I mean, there might be coffee and a conversation just for the show, or you might not want to drink that coffee if you're having it with Vladimir Putin. So anyway, but yeah. So.
I do think I agree with what you said first, Sage. I do think it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Definitely, like Ukraine versus Russia was a case of defense. It still is. It's important to respond to it accordingly. Well, there is also definitely that thing to heal. I think one of the first tips, as class Shaleia said, that people have a tendency to wait until it's a very dire situation, near-death experience before they rise up. And so you kind of have to look about where you could be more present with yourself and proactive in your society, so you don't have to go to the extent of having a near revolution against your government. So yeah, I agree, there's no response, but there's no response but the presence that you can bring in your country and the exercise of power, true exercise of power, which is important to have. Like, it's important to realize that you do have that, it's not just always dire situation, revolution type of thing. So that's my feeling about it.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and the part of it, why I raised it, was that it actually was, again, violence that led to change, because people were forced to pay attention. And I feel like when you put it in relation to individuals, you don't stop a bully by begging them to stop. You kind of need to fight back. You can't really get somebody else to defend you either, because when that person's not around, you are left defenseless. And so the bullying behavior might just continue. So if we take it to that strongly individual level and then blow it up into a more national, like a more kind of national, global level, that's the kind of thing you're seeing. So I'm just a little bit off topic, but I'm just equating it to kind of Ukraine's response. Ukraine is going, yes, support us, but they're also right there in the trenches saying, not on our watch. And if it means that we need to sacrifice ourselves in order to secure our sovereignty, we will. And I feel like that's something that we need to remember as an individual, as a state, as a nation, as a group of people. There is always going to be a requirement for the intention to be followed through with action. You can't intend to be free and then not fight against an oppressing aggressor. It just doesn't work. It's kind of a counterintuitive message. And then you have to, then the question is, well, what should the universe then respond to?
It's just kind of making me think, sorry if I digress, but like this Ukraine-Russia peace deal, what is it truly? Because it doesn't feel like a peace deal. It feels like Russia is still attacking Ukraine and saying, well, it's peace, but we're gonna take the east side of your country and recognize that you did bad there, so we're gonna still be there, and then you can have the rest of your country back. It kind of feels like control, and kind of feels like mixed messages if ever like Ukrainians agree to this peace deal. And it doesn't really feel good. It feels, yeah, kind of icky.
I feel like it's just a facade, because they're still being bullies. They're just bullies, and that's what the agreement shows and speaks to as well, that they're just still choosing to be bullies and to I don't know. It's the whole thing just kind of felt like BS to me,
Yeah. It kind of, to me, it's kind of like the analogy would be like, there's a bully who like goes and tries to steal your lunch money every day, and they're going for all of it. And then you say like, let's have a peace talk, and they say like, yeah, for there to be peace, if you could just give me like half of your lunch money every day, just hand it over peacefully, there'll be peace. Can you do that? I think that it just feels like just giving anything to them feels bad, or one way or another, it seems like that's what's going on, because there's the I think the suggestion was more like that in some of those places like Eastern Ukraine, like Donetsk and Luhansk, that there would be like a referendum as to whether they should join Russia or stay in Ukraine. And I wasn't sure about Crimea, if that was the same. I don't remember it now, but to me, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't seem like it just seems like that's just a way for Russia, especially because they're not Russians. If they supervise an election, the Russian government isn't known for having integrity there at all. But it just seems like a way for them to say, like, basically, we attacked you and you have to give us something for us to stop. And then what is that as a guarantee? Is there a guarantee once you like give something away, like to the bully? Is there really a guarantee that they're going to stop?
It's the exact analogy that we used in our very first discussion, Seeking Harmony Part 1, about their toxic relationship, I think. And yeah, if you give to a narcissistic person, they're gonna keep coming back to abuse you. And also Crimea is not in the deal. Like, it's basically, we keep Crimea, we've been keeping Crimea since 2014, so it's gonna stay that way, and no one talks about it. And also I saw yesterday, after we talked about that NASA is gonna restart their partnership with like Russian astronauts. So I was like, what is it? What's the deal there? What's the energy that we're giving off? are we just accepting that, oh, the country is there, it's always going to be a bully, and we're going to come back to a system that is kind of like we tiptoe around someone, and then we put on pressure so that it stops, but it never stops, and so we go back to like tiptoeing around him. I don't really understand, and I feel like that's just settling. That's, the difference between good and pleasant. I think that's what we've been talking about for like a few minutes in the discussion, and pleasant doesn't even feel that pleasant. It just feels like, no, I don't agree with that.
So I have a little bit of a different opinion, and only for the reason that I think, given where this conflict or war or whatever it is, like whatever we call it, is, the fact of it is that the prolonged consequences, or the consequences of a prolonged war, far outweigh the short-term consequences of letting go of something. And yes, we could very easily say there's a winner and a loser. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, there is no real winner. And the winner becomes what is best for the world as a whole now. Because a prolonged process will, in order to stop a prolonged war, it will absolutely require military intervention from the West. As an ally to the United Nations, as an ally to NATO, it will require intervention from the West. Then you have strong parties, whether we like them or not, that are allied to Russia, who probably have similar types of weaponry and things like that. So if a prolonged process happens here, does it not just put us on the brink of World War III, as opposed to a simpler sacrifice in the short term? And sometimes it's as simple as the compromise is not a win for anybody under the circumstances, but the compromise will serve the greater good. And is it not better for the greater good to be served through a compromise in this instance? And it's hypothetical. Yes, we could probably debate the merits. The fact is, nobody's giving ground. Not really. There's a requirement for Ukraine to give a little bit of ground. There's a requirement for Russia to probably seize some of their shit. But at the end of the day, there's no real winner. The fact is, the world is sitting in a very tumultuous economic situation because of the fact that something like gas or oil is a commodity, and the commodities market is volatile. We have all seen it across the board in the increase in fuel prices, the increase in the cost of living. The fact of the matter is, in the long term, is it beneficial for anybody to be obstinate and refuse to give ground?
Well, I feel like the thing about it, what comes to mind for me is that, like, even if Ukraine had some sort of compromise, and maybe Donetsk and Luhansk voted to, like, be part of Russia, or that happened illegitimately, you know, because it could be an illegitimate result. And they were like, okay, so we gave that to Russia, so maybe the fighting stops for now. Like, I feel like it would only be a for now type of scenario, basically, because the thing about it is, like, they would have to resume eventually. And I'm wondering, like, if they struck a peace deal like that, where Russia, through some means or another, ended up with some of Ukraine's territory, it feels like, you know, then Russia would be even more entrenched in their attempt to, like, take over Ukraine, like, as a whole, because it would only make it more difficult later on to resist them, you know, because Russia would be like, okay, cool, let's set up our military bases in Donetsk and Luhansk and everything like that. And so I don't know if that would be a wise move, even though it would be really difficult to, like, keep continuing on this conflict. And then the motive for Vladimir Putin to do this too, I don't think that his motive is going to go away either, because the next election, which supposedly is a real election, you know, he can't just rig it and be like, oh, whatever, you know, my security forces will hold me in power, but is in 2024. The next election is then. And it seems like, you know, Vladimir Putin has mainly been like, let's, instead of like focusing on really improving Russia and helping make life better for average Russians and everybody, which he has a bit, you know, let's protect the elite, have an oligarchy, and then do foreign conquest every 8 or so years. And the Russian people will love it because we're conquering places and it's awesome, you know, and it just seems like that's his motive. And if he doesn't change his choice and his behavior, he's still going to be motivated to, you know, invade Ukraine or to do territorial conquest. So part of me is kind of like, wouldn't that just be like delaying the inevitable, which is the conflict would continue eventually when Putin needed more of a boost in his public approval, you know? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of feel that too. And it makes me remember a quote from Jeff saying that, you know, fear and the challenges are but a flicker compared to all the love and divinity that there is in the universe. And we can compare the difficult economical situation to the challenges that we have in our own personal lives. Like, if we truly believe that there is something better afterward, there is no giving up or giving ground to something when we know that, you know, it's going to get better eventually, and maybe sooner than we even think. And so, yeah, I feel like my feeling is that spiritually, giving into what's better short term isn't really the best way to do in everything in life. It's like, should always consider what is better in divine truth, and ask ourselves, what is the divine truth and what is it that we need at present. And at present, we need peace more so than you know, economical stability. It's a close one, but it's still like peace first, you know.
Yeah.
Is what I feel. So yeah, I kind of agree with you. And yeah, I wonder about the consequences of giving Putin that kind of boost, you know, to his ego, literally, and to his image. And yeah. And I also wonder about the choices that the Russians are making and will make in the next 2 years, because it's gonna be a transformative 2 years. It could be, or it could be just like be more entrenched in medieval kind of way of thinking, like conquer and celebrate your victory afterwards. So yeah, don't give in to the medieval way. We want democracy. We want democracy here. Like, yeah, that's what I feel. Right. How are you guys feeling about it? Or would you like to go ahead and talk about something else?
Yeah. Did you guys have anything? Did you all have anything to say too about that? Isaiah or Dadaji?
Oh, I would just agree with what you guys are saying. I feel like I see what you were saying, Granville, about with that, but I do feel too that like we just can't agree on any level with like a tyrant. Oh, that's okay. You know, because then you're just kind of, yeah, like boosting their ego. So yeah, I just agree with what you guys were saying.
Yeah. I don't know, but I think, it remains to be seen as we follow the conflict and how it develops. Maybe we'll see it differently, but I feel that's how I feel about it now. I'm just like, I wouldn't want to encourage Russia and give in to them at all right now, because their intention, it's not like they try to make it seem, all their diplomatic communications try to make it seem like Ukraine is the aggressor, or that they're on a level playing field, just like two people who have a conflict and see things differently. And let's strike a compromise. And to me, it's like completely fabricated. Obviously, Russia had an intention that was just totally malignant, and Ukraine had none, other than not only defending itself, from possible attacks, which this attack from Russia kind of shows that that's kind of a good idea. So, like joining NATO. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so like I agree with you guys, but I also think we must just also consider what is actually happening. It's two countries at conflict that probably have significant support on either side, whether other countries have verbally or in writing or in any other way supported them or not. But I feel like the prolonged consequence of resistance on either side is that there could be nothing left on either side. Like how long does this continue, and at what cost? And we have to consider that there's a cost attached, and there's already been a cost attached. And how much more is that cost going to escalate?
Mm.
That those are very real things. And it might not even be at the cost to the rest of the world, but just at the cost of the loss of lives in both for Russia and for the Ukrainians. The loss of homes, the loss of stability, the loss of their sovereignty. There's a lot of loss at the core of this process. And yes, by all means, don't give in to a tyrant. Don't soothe the ego of a tyrant. But at what cost can this be a prolonged process? Because the cost is expensive. If it's costing human lives, it's far too damn expensive.
It's a difficult question because like, and I think a difficult process anyway. Because in this instance, it's way more difficult than on the topic about abortion, for example, to tell what is actually respecting lives. But at a spiritual level, we never truly lose anything, but we have to also to be aligned with our divine self and what is called to do. And I can honestly say that today I don't have a response to, like myself, I don't have a response to how this conflict is going to play out and what is the right choice. I just state what doesn't feel good, and I feel like, yeah, there's a cost, but like there is also a thread that God, gives us, each of us, and we have to follow it. And I feel like, yeah, I just feel like Russia would eat up its neighbors if it was given at least an ounce of like power or rights there. So yeah, it's a difficult topic and question.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was probably my primary purpose with asking the question is that it puts us a lot more into the situation, because it's very easy to observe from the outside and go, oh, this doesn't look right, that doesn't look right. This is black, this is white. This is black, this is white. This is black, this is white. But when you're sitting inside of it, the black and white, given missiles firing and guns firing and everything else, becomes very gray. And even if you lean to a lighter shade of gray as opposed to a darker shade of gray, there's still consequences involved. And in spiritual truth, yes, we are born free, independent, liberated. Everything that we choose and would love to choose is our spiritual truth. But there's always that action step that follows through, that needs the follow through of our choice. And our choice is, if I choose to remain liberated, to what extent am I prepared to act on my choice? And I think that's really the question that we need to probably table, is how far is far under these circumstances? And it's not for somebody to answer. It's just a question to say, well, we are a little bit removed from it, but were we in it, would we be as vocal and as physical as some of the Ukrainian people have been, as the president has been? It's the difference between having a conviction and having the courage of your convictions.
Yeah, but I think they've been pretty brave in like defending their country. And when we eventually first addressed this, they said, like, if you're Ukrainian and you feel like you can give of yourself to this, like, do so, because it's loving your country to do so. And it might come at the cost of your life, but it's just a drop in an eternity. And if you love your country, just do so, or be a refugee and go to another country. Like, both choices are right if they're done in love. So yeah, in that case, responding and being brave is it's just an act of love. And I feel Ukrainians have shown that they were doing so because they loved their country. They've been resourceful and really strong in doing that. And there are many instances where they had many like great ideas to resist, and nobody thought they could resist, but they did. So that's also a truth, and it's a beautiful one, actually. How do you guys feel? I feel like this topic has been there's a lot of processing. It was a little bit heady.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same thing. And in terms of the conversation, I feel like we've kind of reached a completion point. We might not be complete with the conversation as a whole, but I do believe that we've reached a completion point. I also feel like it would probably not be great timing to start a new topic, given that we've got a few minutes left of today's session. So yeah, any concluding thoughts, any other feelings related to what we've already discussed is probably a good place to go to. Otherwise, yeah, it feels to me like we've reached a sense of a completion point. Okay, cool. So I'm not hearing any nays. So I'm going to go with yeses. Yeah, I want to say thank you for today's conversation, and thank you to everybody that's followed our conversation. Also, please feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous conversations in our Seeking Harmony series. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.